My name is Dan Schmitt, and this is Team Chicago Challenge. We're at St. Augustine. We're at St. Augustine Speedway for the AHRMA half mile, and I would be doing these openings from Daytona International, but between Diamond P and Daytona International, they wouldn't allow me to do any videotaping, so you won't get to see the 6-cylinder Hondas in flight or the 3-cylinder MVs. But I am going to talk to a couple of the great stars from that era, the international GP champions, and we're also going to be looking at motocross from Ocala, the vintage motocross, and we're going to be looking at the vintage races from the stadium at Daytona. And then next week we'll be looking at the half-mile racing from here and some of the other things happening in Daytona for Bike Week. So let's go check out the racing action from Ocala to motocross.
Well, the first race we're going to look at is the 250 Intermediate Sportsman. Jumping up front looks like that Robert Leemanstall from Woodstock, Georgia, on a 74 Yamaha YZ250A. It's a real classic piece. They only made maybe about 1,000 of them back in 1974, these YZs. First year of the YZ as we watch them go to this uphill. Coming in the picture is George Mack, my ice race traveling companion. Got the red motocross helmet, the red front, white helmet. He's on a 73 Honda CR250 Elsinore. So there's uphill. You see the leaders are already coming down. Coming now down the final straight to the flag. Up front is 159. It's Robert Leemanstall. Second place is like Craig Borders on a Honda. Third place, Michael Anderson, also on a Honda, as we wait for George Mack. He's running number 511. He comes by. It's up front, number 159. That's at Robert Leemanstall from Woodstock, Georgia, on that Yamaha. Second place looks like a Honda. Here's a classic battle, though, from the early 70s. Honda, Yamaha going at it. Picking up the win is Robert Leemanstall. Second place was Craig Borders on a Honda. Third place went to Michael Anderson on a Honda. Fourth place was Chuck Curtin on a Husqvarna. Fifth place went to Paul Harrer as we watch George Mack. And they ended up picking up 13th in his class, but this was our first event down in Florida. Next race we look at Classic 500 Experts. Then we got a couple BSAs, AJS 67. That looks like a Husqvarna. That's the Classic 500 Novice class. But the experts are up front. Number 4, that looks like James Smith. I think he's on a BSA. 441 Victor. Second place, 78, is Steve Tucker out of Canada, and he's on a BSA 440 Victor. And the AJS, that's like Dan Johns from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Talking about them 441 Victors. I think that's the bike that Jeff Smith rode to be a world champion. And Jeff Smith is the director of AHRMA. And with the novices up front is Matt Benson. Second place is Dennis Brown. A Husqvarna, Anna Greaves. Remember, these bikes only have the maximum of 7 inches of travel in the front, 4 inches in the back. Number 78 with that BSA just moved into the lead. That's Steve Tucker. Now the AJS has moved into second. That's Dan Johns. Third place is James Smith. Finally, and look at the plus 50 class. Up front, looks like the Botacos up front. That's Hughes Weaver. And running in third place is former world champion Jeff Smith, who's also the director of AHRMA. And it's the plus 50 expert class. That's Hugh Weaver. Second place is Dave Brickers. And at CZ, there goes Jeff Smith on a Can-Am. And Jeff Smith, when he came over from England, went to work for the Can-Am. So this could be a bike that he helped design to bring to the American market. 377 is Al Gardner from Stuart, Florida, on a 250 Honda. This is the plus 50 intermediate bike. We watch the leaders in the expert class. Looks like the Otaco's still up front. Reeves is in second. Jeff Schmitt on that Can-Am is third. And with the plus 50 intermediates picking up the win was Al Gardner. Second place was John Hugo's. Third place went to Joe Calmes. And with the experts picking up the win on the CZ was Dave Brickner. Second place went to Hugh Weavers, and Jeff Schmitt, the former world champion, could only pull out a third, but it sure is great seeing a former world champion racing with AHRMA. And talk about former world champions, Rob Iannucci from Team Obsolete and Mike from Vanson Leathers invited me to the Team Obsolete banquet, and I had the opportunity to talk to the former world champion 15 times, Giacomo Agostini.
It's with great pleasure that Team Obsolete and Vanson Leather has brought over probably one of the greatest motorcycle racers there's ever been, Giacomo Agostini. And the one thing I have to say is I've raced with Kenny Roberts, I've raced with Eddie Lawson, I've raced with Wayne Rainey. All these different greats are part of my era. But when I was reading about motorcycle racing, it was you that I was reading about. I mean, I was in the dirt track when I started out, but I always paid attention to road racing, and it just seemed that you were the one that were winning all the races, all through the late 60s and into the 70s. So you made the jump from the older era into the newer era. And why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got into motorcycle racing in the beginning?
Yeah, I started in '61 with a lot of problems because my parents don't want I race a motorcycle. So I must buy, with my money, I must buy the motorcycle, and I started to race. But fortunately I started to win quickly. In my first race I finished second. So Mr. Morini, the owner of Moto Morini, he see me and he give me a contract to race with his factory bike. So I start with Morini, and quickly I jump with 500 with MV Agusta, and I have a lot of victory because I think MV was a very good bike, and also I race in two class, 350 and 500. And I think in my life I meet and I race with many riders. I start with Provini, with Pasolini, with Bergamonti, with Grassetti, with Gene Redman, with Phil Reed, with Tom Phillips, with Luigi Taveri, with Barry Sheen, with Saarinen, with Mike Haywood, of course, with Kenny Roberts, Barry Sheen. I say, I race with everybody. So what you say before, I start and I have, I think, two generations.
Exactly. You do span the generation. Now, when you ran the MV, the 350 and the 500, were they always 3 cylinders, or were there 4 cylinders, or did you experiment with different configurations?
When I start with 3-cylinder 350 and 3-cylinder 500. And after we try to use also in some circuit we use in the 500 we use the 350 but bigger, example 420
right.
or 450,
right,
because some circuit is a little better, it's more light bike and so. And in the end we make the 4-cylinder, and in the start we have a lot of problems, but we need the 4-cylinder to beat Honda because 3-cylinder don't have enough horsepower.
Right.
So we make a 4-cylinder, and after 1 year also the 4-cylinder was good, and I win also with the four-cylinder.
Okay, and then you made the switch over to Yamaha and ran the two-stroke.
Yeah, because Yamaha offered me, and 3 years before Yamaha offered me the bikes, but I'm not ready because I think the two-stroke is not ready. So I waiting, and the 73, end of the 73, Yamaha come back again. And that time I think is the time to change, because four-stroke already at the top and the two-stroke coming, and I think two-stroke coming better than four-stroke. So I take this decision, and the first mile race I come here in Daytona, and with the 700 Yamaha four-cylinder, and I win. So during the season I leading also 350 and 500, but I win only 350 because I crash with the 500. But I win the 575. So also with Yamaha I have a good time.
Okay, so you said that this is the first time you've been back to Daytona in 22 years?
No, I come back with my team, because I come back in 82 with my team, and I win. My team win with Crosby.
Oh yeah, correct.
And after I come back again with Eddie Lawson, and I win with Eddie Lawson.
Right, okay.
So I have a good, and Daytona, I have always good luck.
Okay, so how about for 1996? Do you have any plans with a team as we speak?
I have my team, but I don't decide yet. It's a little difficult to find a good sponsor and to have I like to have a good team, and it's a little difficult. I don't push too hard for 96. Maybe I'm waiting and I see what I can do for the future.
Right. Okay, well, I can't tell you what pleasure it is to finally meet you, and good luck, and maybe we'll meet again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you're going to have to excuse the bad video, because I was supposed to interview Mr. Agostini at the Speedway in the daylight. And now we move to Municipal Stadium in Daytona for the Vintage National Short Track. Jumping up front, number 65 from Honorable Taco is John Daniels. Second place on a Harley Davidson is Donnie Wolf, and he's on a Harley Sprint, bringing back the old days at Santa Fe Speedway or Flint Motor Speedway or Granite City. This is short track racing how it was in the 60s. That Harley Sprint is now up front. You wonder, how could a four-stroke beat a two-stroke? Well, now you get to see on a slippery track like we had at Municipal Stadium. That four-stroke Harley offered a little bit more traction. During the finals, the track started breaking up. Third place, 98, is Kenny Thomas. But this battle going on for third. There's the Boltaco, but that Harley Davidson Sprint with Donnie Wharf from Winchester, Tennessee, had the fast lines at Municipal Stadium. Next class we're going to look at is 251 to 600 Vintage Classic. Jumping up front looks like George Reinmeyer on a Triumph, but Craig Brecken from Grand Rapids, Michigan on that BSA is in second place. This class also, no brakes are allowed. George Richminer's on a 500 twin, rigid suspension. Triumph. Craig Brecken's on a 441 Victor BSA. It looks like he's got a more modern frame, but he's got no suspension. He's got a strut in the back and no brakes. Third place looks like 56 is Charles Southgate on a BSA. 27 is Bino Rodi, and he's on a Royal Enfield. Going on to pick up the win was George Richmeyer Jr. on that Triumph. Second place was Craig Brecken. The last race we're going to look at is Vintage Dinosaur. Bikes built before 1951, I believe. No brakes. Jumping up front, it looks like Bino Rodi from Winter, Georgia on that Royal Enfield. We got two Harley Davidsons here, 23 and number 1. And number 1 is George Wills from Manhattan, Illinois. And at Illinois, Harley Davidson WR 750 side valve tank shifted Bino Rodi with that Royal Enfield. Second place looks like Leo Anthony from Port Huron, Michigan. But George Wills moves on the outside. The national champ with the number 1 plates is trying to get around Bino Rodi. So we got a Royal Enfield and a Harley Davidson. George is on the gas. George Wills moved into the lead, riding a little wild, a little on the outside. You seen last lap as he hit that hole on the back straight. As George Wills goes on to pick up the win. Second place was Leo Anthony, and third place went to Leo Jovanovic. Now we're going to head over to Main Street. Main Street in Daytona Beach, Florida. The friendliest town in the United States towards motorcycles, because the motorcycles bring in over $250 million during Bike Week. Even Uncle Sam showed up on his vintage Harley Davidson tank shifter. They welcome the motorcycles in Daytona Beach. And Main Street for 6 days straight is wall-to-wall motorcycles and pretty girls on motorcycles, even if they're not all Harley Davidsons. But everybody on 2 wheels is welcome. And here's one leaving. Now she looks back. During the beginning of the week, the weather was great. The bikes were there. Every hotel room was filled. And everybody had a great time. What was that saying? You meet the nicest people on a Harley? Headed over to the Team Obsolete banquet again. We look over the shoulder of Mike from Vanson Leathers. And I had the opportunity to talk to 6-time world champion from South Africa, Jim Redman.
I'm with Jim Redman, who from South Africa, and when I was in grammar school and I was reading Cycle World magazine and Cycle magazine, even though they didn't have a lot of coverage of motorcycle racing per se, but there would always be an article here and there about what was going on in Europe. And if there was one name that stood out, and especially in the association with the 6-cylinder Honda, I remember reading about, and I couldn't even imagine how there could be a 6-cylinder 250. That was beyond my imagination. But I'm really fortunate to have this opportunity to talk to Jim Redman. And my first question, Jim, in your era of racing, like you explained earlier this evening when we talked previously, and you said that when you went to Europe first time, you went on a shoestring yourself. You had a couple Nortons, and you ran 2 or 3 years out of your own budget.
That's right.
And basically, you were racing over there sort of like the Americans over here were dirt tracking. You'd go from race to race. And
that's right. You know, there were about 20 of us in the Continental Circus that had about the same ability. So there would be 2 or 3 works bikes in the front, and then there'd be these 20 riders behind, and your job was to finish as high up in that 20 as you could. And if everything went well, you'd finish maybe in 3rd, 4th, or 5th place. You could never expect to win. And if things went just a little bit off, you could be 15, 16, 17 place. It was a tough score.
Right. All right, then the other thing that you're explaining, and maybe we should talk about this too, when you got on to be on the Honda factory, and nowadays factory riders basically run on their own. There's no team orders, there's no plans. They're just after the championship, they don't care who wins it. But you explained to me back then that you guys would sit down at the beginning of the year, and so you would be the 350 champ, someone else would go for the 500, and you would also run those other classes and work together on the racetrack. Is that
That's right. We planned as if there was no one else in the race. So we said, right, we want to win all these classes. We're going to run in 4 classes, and we have 5 or 6 riders. And we say, right, well, we're going to have this rider win the class, and this one will back him up. And then the one that was doing the backing up in that class would be the winner of the other class, and the other one would back up. Sorry, I've got the flu since I've been in Florida. And so we planned all this, and of course, that's only planning when you're in a perfect position. And of course, if an opposing team passed us, the orders went by the board, and we all just tried to get the Honda in front. But if we managed to then, both of us get to the front, we would take up our positions, the idea being that it was silly if I won a race one week and you run the same race the next week. That means that we haven't scored maximum points, and somebody else can come along, win 2 races and pass both of us.
Right.
So we worked on first goal, win every championship for Honda, so that, and it didn't really matter who had it. And of course, after 1 or 2 races, we maybe changed the plan, because the plan was for me to win, but you won the first 2 races, so I would revert to the backup role and try and help you win the title.
Right.
And we had a great team with a great team spirit, and we all worked together, and we were, I think, a happy team, so we became a lucky team, and then we were a lucky team and we became happier, so it really worked well.
Well, actually, sometimes it's almost if you get too serious and everybody's too tense, that it doesn't really work in the track. So it really takes having the right guys together, the right mechanics, the right equipment, the right riders, getting along together and putting
and then mixing it up in a pot, and it comes out to exactly the right mixture. And we had that. The mechanics, they would die for us. They would work all night. I had an example once in Germany. We got to the German Grand Prix, and we suddenly realized that I had won every round of the championship, and there was just the German and the Italian to go, and I could have a clean sweep where I won every round of the 350 championship, which is not often done. I don't know if anyone has done it, but they probably have. Anyway, at Solitude, which was the German Grand Prix, I was quickest in practice each time, but there was a slight vibration. And my mechanic, Ike-san, said, okay, I'll strip the bike tonight before the race. And I said to him, no, leave it. Look, it's not that bad. And he said, no. If it's not right, then it's wrong. Right. And he said, you don't complain ever unless it's wrong, you know.
Right.
They stripped the bike, and they found an idler gear inside the engine had a bracket broken, and they put a new bracket on there. And I said to him, would it have done the race? And he said, no, about half the race.
Right.
And this was an example of the feel I had for the bike and the confidence that he had in me when I said, there's just a slight vibration. He wouldn't rest till he stripped the bike. And we won that race, and we won in Monza, and we got every round of the championship. And we wouldn't have done that if there hadn't have been that very good mixture of working together that made us actually strip that bike the night before the race and find that little problem.
Okay, now another thing, and this will be the final question. You were in the era when they went from Honda with 4 strokes only. Honda was dedicated to have the fastest 4-stroke engines.
Correct.
And then the Yamahas were coming along with the 2 cycles. So you were right at that end of the era. But why did you finally quit racing?
Well, the 2-strokes, obviously, they're able to make them lighter and accelerate faster and that. And we were getting more and more cylinders. We got a 4-cylinder, so they would get a 4-cylinder. So when we had to get a 6-cylinder, and it was just going on and on. But the reason I quit racing, I had a bad accident, broke my wrist very badly. It wouldn't heal. And I was sort of getting towards the end of my career. I was 38 years of age. And the youngsters like Giacomo Agostini, and Mike was 7 years younger than me. Giacomo's about 12 years younger than me. And there comes a time for the old dog to step down and the new dog come in, you know. And that crash was just the one point that made it happen at that time. And if I hadn't, I maybe have raced on another year or 2. But the crash and the bad arm, and it wouldn't fix, and it didn't have the strength. And I said, right, I've had a good run. I'm still at the top. I'm still winning Grand Prix. Let's give it knock it on the head. Right.
Well, it's great to talk to you, and I hope I get a chance to see you again. And we're at St. Augustine. We're going to be looking at the half-mile racing with AHRMA.
And this is the classic battle you were seeing back in the late 60s up to 72. We got a 500 Triumph with an overhead valve engine. And George Wills is on that WR Harley Davidson. But the WR is an earlier model. It was replaced by another side valve, the KR 750. And it's George Richmeyer on the Triumph, number 10, George Wills, 1995 AHRMA National Champion in the dinosaur class. But this will give you an idea of what was going on through the 60s, through 1971. This was the battle. And they had 500 overhead valve Triumph, just making a little more power, a little lighter than the Harley Davidson, and picking up the win in Vintage Classic is George Richmeyer. George Wills is second. George Wills out of Manhattan, Illinois, at Illinois Harley Davidson WR. And last but not least, we're going to look at the plus 30 class. George Mack. He's on the 4 and 6 prepared Rotex Geo Trading, the cow bike, Eat Beef. And George is really getting around smart on this half-mile track to St. Augustine. Special thanks to Dave McCarthy from DM Promotions for inviting Team Chicago down to Florida to run this vintage national, AHRMA National. We're in St. Augustine on this beautiful half-mile track. Second place looks like Phil Wolf. Music for the show by Engine, Mike Priest, Intrigue, and Travesty. And all this music was recorded at Fireside Studios, Westchester, Illinois.
And it was the late, great George Mack going on to pick up the win. And I should point out that George and I went to many, many races and had a great time. For more information on AHRMA, American Historic Racing Motorcycle Association, it's AHRMA.org. Contact me, and I love to hear from my audience. It's teamdan45@gmail.com. And remember, you can always search on YouTube with Dan Schmitt Motorcycle Racing for great motorcycle racing action, Dan Schmitt Politics, to learn what makes America great. And I highly encourage you to visit the World of Motorcycle Museum. They're in Winamac, Indiana. They're 4 miles south of North Judson. They're on Highway 39. But give them a call first at 574-896-3172. It's a great trip and a great collection of motorcycles. And to pick up your copy of the Team Chicago History Package, go to Rich's Yamaha in Lockport, Illinois, but give them a call first at 815-838-8130. And their website is richesyamaha.com.